I always believed the phone was our lifeline. Tom and I met during college, when landlines were still common, and we'd talk late into the night, tangled up in words we couldn't yet share in person. Over the years, the phone was how we checked in, shared silly jokes, or just reminded each other we were thinking of one another. But somewhere along the way, those midnight calls stopped feeling special. They became routine, like everything else in our marriage. Tom's job as a consultant kept him away from home 3 weeks out of every month, and when he was back, he was more a guest than a husband. Quiet dinners, polite conversation, and then he'd retreat into work emails until midnight. That was the space where I first heard Ryan's voice. Our phone line had started cutting in and out, dropping calls right in the middle of conversations. One night, after Tom had left for another trip, I called the telephone company. It was late past 11 p.m. and I remember the warmth in Ryan's voice when he picked up. "Ma'am, don't worry," he said, the slightest smile in his tone. "I'll stay on the line until we figure this out." We spent over an hour troubleshooting. He asked me about the blinking lights on the modem, the number of devices we had connected, and the age of our wiring. But it wasn't just technical talk. Between steps, we drifted into small confessions. He shared how his daughter loved to dance around the living room in princess costumes. I told him how empty the house felt with Tom gone so much. At the end of the call, the connection was fixed. But I didn't want to hang up. Neither did he. A week later, when the issue happened again, or maybe I made it happen, I can't even remember now, it was Ryan who picked up my call. Our voices lit up with recognition. The conversation veered almost immediately from phone lines to life stories. He told me he was 34, divorced, and working the late shift so he could spend afternoons with his daughter. I told him I was 32, married 5 years, but lately feeling like a ghost in my own home. Those calls became our ritual. I'd wait until 10 or 11 p.m., knowing Tom was asleep or in another city, and I'd invent a reason to call. Static on the line, dropped calls, slow internet, anything. We'd talk about everything and nothing, our childhoods, favorite songs, the way we wished someone would look at us like they used to. His voice felt like warmth on a cold night. Eventually, our conversations grew more intimate. One night, he asked if I ever felt truly seen by Tom. I hesitated, but the truth slipped out, not for a long time. His response was a soft, understanding sigh. "You deserve more." The next evening, he asked if he could see me in person. It was like a punch to the chest. I knew what it meant, but I told myself it was just coffee, just closure for the silly, secret thing. I agreed. We met at a small diner on the edge of town, one that stayed open all night and always smelled like burnt coffee and pancakes. When I walked in, he stood up so quickly he nearly knocked over his chair. In person, he was taller than I'd imagined, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. The first hour passed like our phone calls, easy, honest, electric. We barely touched our coffee. Then, as midnight came and went, the air between us shifted. He reached across the table and brushed his fingers against mine. My heart thundered in my chest. I knew I should have pulled my hand back, but I didn't. When he offered to walk me to my car, it was raining lightly. He held his jacket over us as we crossed the empty parking lot. I paused by my door, fumbling for my keys. Then, he kissed me. It was gentle at first, uncertain, like we were both afraid to shatter the moment. But when I didn't stop him, it deepened. The rain, the darkness, the months of loneliness, all of it crashed together in that kiss. I felt alive for the first time in years. That night, I didn't go home. We drove to a cheap motel off the highway. The walls were thin and the blankets scratchy, but I didn't care. We made love with a desperate urgency, like we'd been waiting our whole lives to find each other. In the moments after, lying tangled in sweat and sheets, I felt an ache in my chest that was both thrilling and terrifying. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. When I finally got home the next morning, the sun was rising. I showered quickly, scrubbing his scent from my skin. I climbed into bed next to Tom, who stirred but didn't wake up. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I wondered how long it would be before he noticed the cracks in the life we'd built. But Tom didn't notice. He left again 2 days later for another week-long trip, and I found myself alone with a phone I couldn't stop picking up. Ryan's voice had become my addiction, the thing that made the silence bearable. Each conversation pulled me deeper, each meeting made it harder to remember the woman I'd once been. I knew this was spiraling, but I couldn't stop. The weeks that followed were a blur of stolen moments. Ryan and I met whenever we could, quiet dinners on the edge of town, motel rooms booked for a few hours at a time, whispered phone calls late into the night. Each encounter deepened our bond, yet every time I walked back into my house, the weight of what I was doing grew heavier. I started noticing little things I'd never paid attention to before, the way Tom's wedding ring clicked against his coffee mug, how he double-checked the locks every night, the soft snores that filled the room after he drifted to sleep. I felt like an intruder in my own life. I'd watch Tom reading emails at the kitchen table, his brow furrowed in concentration, and wonder if he had any idea how far I'd drifted. If he could see past the smile I forced onto my face each morning. I wanted him to notice, to confront me, to give me a reason to stop, but he was always distracted by the next project, the next flight, the next big opportunity. One evening, I was getting ready for yet another secret meeting with Ryan when Tom called from the airport. His flight had been cancelled, he said, and he'd be home by midnight. My stomach clenched. I quickly texted Ryan to cancel, but the sense of panic lingered. I realized how easily my worlds could collide and how unprepared I was if they did. When Tom walked through the door that night, suitcase in hand and exhaustion etched across his face, I tried to play the part of the loving wife. I wrapped my arms around him, kissed his cheek, and asked about his trip. He hugged me back, but I felt a stiffness in his embrace. His eyes scanned mine for a moment too long, as if he was searching for something just out of reach. "Everything okay here?" he asked. His tone was casual, but his eyes held questions I couldn't answer. I forced a bright smile. "Of course. I missed you." He didn't press further, but the next few days felt tense, like we were walking a tightrope neither of us acknowledged. I was careful with my phone, careful with my words. But my heart was elsewhere, caught between the life I'd built and the life I was secretly living. Then, it all unraveled. I was in the kitchen on a quiet Sunday afternoon when Tom's voice called from the living room. "Hey, Justine, did you mean to leave this out?" He held up my phone. The screen was lit up with a new message. From Ryan. My heart stopped. I walked slowly toward him, trying to keep my breathing steady. "Oh, it's just the phone company guy," I said too quickly, grabbing the phone from his hands. But Tom's eyes had already darkened. He wasn't a fool. "That's a lot of messages for someone fixing our internet," he said quietly. His voice held none of the warmth I'd once taken comfort in, just an icy calm that scared me more than if he'd shouted. I tried to explain, to spin a lie that might buy me time, but Tom held up a hand to stop me. "I already know," he said. "I've known for weeks." He told me about the phone records he'd checked, the unfamiliar numbers he'd traced, the nights he'd come home early, watching from his car as I left the house dressed up for someone who wasn't him. He'd seen me with Ryan once, he admitted, but he couldn't bring himself to confront me then. "I wanted to believe it wasn't what it looked like," he said softly, "but I guess it was." I felt sick. I tried to reach for him, but he stepped back. "Don't," he said, his voice breaking. I'd never seen him cry before. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing alone with the weight of what I'd done pressing on my chest like a stone. That night, Tom slept in the guest room. The silence between us was deafening. I tried to text Ryan, but the words wouldn't come. What could I possibly say? The fantasy we'd built felt hollow and cheap in the face of what I'd destroyed. In the days that followed, Tom and I exchanged only the most necessary words about bills, errands, schedules. We lived like polite strangers sharing a house. Every time I looked at him, I saw the betrayal in his eyes. I couldn't stand it. Then, one evening, he came home with a stack of papers in his hand. He sat me down at the kitchen table. "I talked to a lawyer," he said quietly. "These are the divorce papers." My breath caught. I had hoped, foolishly, that we might find a way back to each other. But as he slid the papers across the table, I saw how final this was. The man I'd once loved more than anything was done with me, and I couldn't blame him. As I signed the papers, my hand trembled. I wanted to say I was sorry, that I never meant to hurt him, but the words felt meaningless. The damage was done. I had shattered the life we built with a few whispered words over a phone line. In the weeks after Tom moved out, the house felt impossibly quiet. I still reached for my phone at night, instinctively wanting to call Ryan, but I never did. What had once felt so exciting now felt tainted. I knew he was waiting for me, but I couldn't face him. I couldn't face myself. One rainy evening, I sat in the living room, the house dark except for the glow of a single lamp. I listened to the storm outside and thought about how everything had unraveled. About how I'd let loneliness and longing blind me to what really mattered. And about how, no matter what happened next, I'd carry the scars of my choices forever. Because in the end, it wasn't the phone line that broke, it was me.